The following program is brought to you by Whiteman TV and Bruce Telecom.
Welcome to the show, Now and Then, with Homer Watson, Carl Ahrens, Barry McCarthy, and myself, Toni Luciani. When I got the call to participate in this exhibition, I thought I was the then, because usually I'm one of the older artists in exhibitions at group shows, but I'm actually the youngest, if you can believe it. The show means so much to be associated with three well-known, established artists. Barry McCarthy I've known for several years. His watercolors just blow me away as far as their exquisite technical ability and their atmosphere, and they're just so crisp and clean. And watercolor is one of the most difficult mediums that you can actually master. Because it can't be dirty, it can't be muddy, and his work is never that way. So I've always been in love with his work. Homer Watson, I was driving along one day, Homer Watson Boulevard in Kitchener, and I thought, Homer Watson, wow. I know a little bit about him. I know that he's a well-known Canadian established landscape painter, but I didn't see a lot of his work. So that evening I went home and I looked on the computer and I saw his work, and I was just taken away with the beauty of his landscapes and his sceneries. It was a week later I got a call asking to participate in an exhibition that included Homer Watson. So my idea is to travel the roads that say Da Vinci and Michelangelo. Maybe there'll be an exhibition for me in one of those situations as well. Anyway, so I'm thrilled to be here. I'm thrilled. This beautiful museum means so much to me, the Wellington County Museum. Through the years, have been a wonderful support for me. I've had a few exhibitions here, and the people and the building itself are just a marvel for myself and for my art career. So, Barry, up to you.
Thanks, Toni. It's funny you mentioned receiving the call. I received that call too after coming back from vacation and picked up all our messages, and it was Sandu on the phone saying, would you be interested in showing with Homer Watson? And it was like, oh my God, like he's a rock star in our business. So I said, yeah, I mean, how awesome is that? And like Toni, I've shown here before, so this is going to be probably my 4th or 5th exhibition here. So again, I'm flattered they just haven't gotten enough of me and my work. So I said to him, I said, you know, I've even got a title going through my head. It's like Then and Now. And he goes, well, actually, the show's called Now and Then. I go, you've got to be kidding me. That's too weird. So I said, yeah, I'm totally on board. We've even got the title of the show figured out. Just tell me what you want me to do. And he says, well, you're sharing the limelight with Toni Luciani. And I went, oh my God, you got to be kidding me. Toni and I show at the same gallery in Toronto, at the Loch Gallery. And he's got a big painting here that I've been aware of Toni's work for some time as well. I mean, being in a small town of Durham and me being in Elora, it's kind of hard to rise above everybody else. I mean, this is called hard work. This is a hotbed of artists. There's sculptors and poets and jewelers and printmakers and painters here, and there's like 85 to 100 artists that are here, and they're here for a reason. I'm just part of that, and been in the area for 40 years and just quietly worked away in my studio, as we both have, you know, working on our own ideas, and then eventually coming out of our space, and then having a show in Toronto at the Loch Gallery. And it is, I don't know, Toni hasn't mentioned this, but it is lonely business. You spend a lot of time by yourself. Because I taught for 30 years, it made it a little bit easier to talk to crowds, where most artists have a hard time talking to crowds because they spend so much time alone. So it's not just about Toni and I, it's about Homer Watson and Carl Ahrens, who's pretty much an unknown. And we're so grateful to be connected with these two gentlemen. I mean, they're folk heroes and, like I said, rock stars in our business. Homer Watson knew William Lyon Mackenzie, they were buddies. And he lived in Dune Village in Kitchener and did oil paintings all his life, studied a little bit in Europe. And his work throughout his career moved along nicely. His style changed, his colors changed, his compositions have changed, and we're all the better for it because we get to study these guys and learn from it. And Carl is sort of this unsung hero. Oh my God, I mean, as Toni was saying, he really is very good and yet not very well known, and that's a shame. I guess maybe he was overshadowed by his buddy, but it doesn't matter. He's in here now, and so are we, and we're so grateful and lucky to be exhibiting with these two gentlemen. I'm not sure what they would say if they were here, but I'm sure it would have been very welcoming. Anyways, we're going to move around. This is, again, what Phil has done. He's put 4 of us together in this nice little group. You can see how he has blocked things so nicely and then laid out the cards. Like everything is a nice pattern and nicely laid out, and that's just one example of what we see all around the room. So I'm not going to hog the time and the space here. Toni, do you want to take the group to, or take Adam to one of your pieces and maybe talk about when and where and why?
Let's start from one end and go around the...
We could.
I had this painting at Nancy Poole's studio many years ago. Actually, it was Nancy Poole's or Loch Gallery, I can't remember. Same location, same space, different name. And one of our, I call her my art mama, is Joan Martin at Nancy Poole's studio, and she came up to me and said, Toni, this painting's been hanging on the wall for 2 weeks, and people keep coming in, the same people sometimes with different groupings, and they stand there and they talk about this painting, and they talk about the essence of the painting, what it means, why the wind turbines, why the Catholic Church, why the cemetery, what does it mean? Because they're talking about the death of farmland. They're talking about the Catholic Church and the diminishing aspect of that. And so they come to me and they ask me, what does it mean, Joan? And I say, well, the artist doesn't reveal what he means by his work. It's whatever you want it to mean, that's what it is. Anyway, so I walk in after this, and Joan comes up to me and says, Toni, what does this painting mean? I said, Joan, you told me years ago never to explain my work. I know, but I need to know. I need to know. And so I said, are you sure? I said, yes, otherwise I'm kicking you out of the gallery. So I explained to her, well, there's a small town near Durham called Shelburne, and it's full of wind turbines. And there is this country church, but it's not in this position. I've juxtaposed the wind turbines behind a cemetery just for my own reasons. And every time I drove through Shelburne to go to Toronto, as my way through, I would see these wind turbines. And I'd start humming and I'd start whistling. Look on the Bright Side of Life, Monty Python, which is the last scene of the film where you have this silhouetted scene of all the crucifixes and there's whistling and singing, Look on the Bright Side of Life. And so that's what I meant by it, my own reasons for whistling and humming. And Joan looked at me and she said, you're right, Toni, never explain yourself. So that's the story. No, don't tell that story. Anyway, I just did. So it's also in a book that I had written that explains the story, just in case in 200 years from now, art critics, they go back to the death of farmland and the Catholic Church and wind turbines and so forth. So no. As far as the artist is concerned, it's about Life of Brian and the whistling Look on the Bright Side of Life. There we go. That's the story behind this painting.
Okay, so the Bright Side of Life. Toni, you're not going to believe this. This is too crazy. Gail and I just watched that movie 2 nights ago. because you were chatting with her
Yes.
about Monty Python, and you took her right by surprise because, and then we were going through Netflix the other night. She said, I was talking to Toni about Monty Python. I said, well, let's go look it up, and there it is. And I remember the scene of the crucifixion. It was crazy. It's so hilarious. It only got 2.5 stars, but I would have given it 4.
Yeah,
anyways, good one.
I got a painting out of it. So
Yes, you did. Yeah. Okay, so I've been painting the gorge probably, well, maybe 30 years. And I stopped for a little while, but I always seem to find myself being attracted back to this area of Ontario, my backyard actually. And I always tell people, because I do teach watercolors, I always tell people that the gorge is sort of that perfect compositional area where it's full of X's and diagonals, and part of the wall of the, depending on what time of day it is, one part of the wall is lit up like a Christmas tree and the other part's in shadow. So you get your yin-yang element in a painting, which the brain likes to see. But this painting I did this winter, particularly for this show. I wanted to revive my Elora Gorge series again. And I mean, I didn't take anything out and I didn't put anything in. And it's just a love affair that I have with rocks, trees, and sky, and triangles and X's. You can see how your eye will make a wedge coming up through the light in the water to this rock. And then you see these massive shapes coming down, and these rocks introduce in the water, and these rocks introduce and sets the stage. This is pretty much the background. So it's called Low Levels on the Irvine, and I think maybe it might sound a little bit corny, but we're fighting Save Our Water here in this county, and Nestle's is threatening to dig a well, and hence the title Low Levels of the Irvine. It's my little way of getting back at some of the political issues that we're dealing with here. I know it's a bit of a stretch, but even though it looks like a safe painting, and that's the other element I like about painting, is they could look very safe and romantic, yet there's an underlying foreboding element, maybe a little bit of angst there that I certainly found that in the icebergs, when the icebergs were melting off Baffin Island and coming down across Newfoundland. I mean, oh my God, to me it was the end of the world. And that, you know, as artists, as Toni and I, you know, we see things that we're either driving or walking, riding our bike, on a motorcycle, whatever. We see things that we want to make a statement about, and we're lucky enough to be affected by that like ordinary people, but we get to make a statement with it and relive it for 2 or 3 weeks and get to sign it and go, okay, that's where I want to be, like Toni's windmills. I mean, not everybody likes these things. Everybody likes the Elora Gorge, but nobody likes having our water stolen. So it's our little way of, you know, this is who we are and this is why we do it. I think Toni and I were chatting earlier off camera about being in the moment and always searching light, which seems to be a celebration of where you are at that particular time. As artists, I think we're driving and walking, like I said, or on our bike, and we're passing by things that are actually quite ordinary. And if it's that particular time of day where it's wet like Skull Castle, or even this time of day where it was just raining. I just finished a large show in Toronto and I was visually burned out. I was going for a drive, just myself in my car, and I passed by this. This is like a mile away from my house. And it was an oh my God field. It had just rained, hence the puddle that's in the tire track. And I saw this tire that was off to the side, so I went, oh, what a perfect title. It's called The Tired Road. So, I mean, as artists, we have some comedy mixed in with a little bit of seriousness and something that might even be borderline corny. Doesn't matter. Anyways, this painting turned out so well because it celebrates my backyard. Literally, it is behind my house in the country. And all of the colors kind of came together. I love this kind of maroon, you know, all the leaves have fallen off these trees. The road takes you down and connects to this little road that zips along and through here, and there's a couple of little parallel lines over here that take you to the farmhouse. And it's this kind of like windy little path. And there's no real symbolic emphasis here except for the fact that, you know, it's beyond ordinary. Like, I've driven past this field before and after, and it's not half as nice as it was the day I found it. And in connection with this, not to rattle too long, but I've been down to Pennsylvania, and I have a connection with Andrew Wyeth and his family, and I was taken to Kerner's house by a family friend, and I tell you, folks, it was the most ordinary house that you've ever seen. It was owned by a German American, and Andrew Wyeth painted it all his life and celebrated the building and everybody in and out of and around the building. And I think this is it for me too. It's ordinary. Yet you find it at a certain time of day and being in the moment, passing by when it just rained. And I'm certainly, you know, I remember I was not looking for subject matter that day. I just, like I said, finished a show and I was pretty much mentally burned out. But I thought, oh my God, this is going to be the first painting I do for my next show. And a big oil painting came out of this, and I loved it so much I decided to keep it and put it in my own collection. So this actually hangs in my bedroom, and I just love looking at it, and I'm really glad Sandu picked it out as well as being a strong little watercolor. Every once in a while, you can't win every game, but every once in a while you do, and you win, and the best ones I now keep. I don't need to sell them.
Now, and I think it was the early 2000s, a tornado came through Durham, Ontario. And it just created a swath of destruction right downtown Durham and crossed into the conservation park. Unfortunately, a little boy was in its way and passed and died. But it continued through some farmland up a concession nearby, and I have friends who live on that concession road. And so it was the day after, and we're out with our chainsaws and helping what we can. It was just total destruction in a lot of areas. And a good friend of mine, or a friend of mine, lives on this particular farm, and her barn was completely demolished. The roof was gone. The house was untouched. And there's a story as well. While the tornado came through into Durham, it took our activity center building completely off its foundation. There were 3 exercise bicycles left bolted to the concrete. 100 feet away, there's a senior's residence. Pansies were still in the pots, untouched. So anyway, I was there the day after, helping my friend clean out her, or just to clean things up. And I thought, wow, the light, the sun was out, the sky was blue, but everything was just completely demolished, fallen down. So I thought, what a crazy, eerie feeling I'm having. It's the aftermath. And I started this painting with a blue sky and just a fallen down barn with rubble on the ground. And I called it Aftermath. I even signed it. And I looked at it after I finished it. I said, no, it looks like just a decaying, fallen down barn. To me, it meant something. To many other people who look at it, they wouldn't realize that a tornado had just come through the day before. So even though it was finished and signed, I put it back on my easel a few weeks later, and I said, you know what? It doesn't work. It doesn't work. It needs something, and I need to destroy it like the tornado did. So I created this ominous sky with a tornado in the distance. And I started throwing a lot of the debris up in the air as if it had just come through, and it's still having things in the air. And it completely changed the atmosphere of what the original was. Before, it was calm and serene, and it was like a pause, a breath of pause. And now it was an eruption. And I thought, yes. Now it works. Now it has the meaning that I want it to have. And so it does have a blue sky underneath all that. And just like the day after, it came through. But now it's back up. And it's called Twister.
Toni and I were just after talking about Twister. You mentioned the word aftermath, and I went, oh my God, why does that word hit me? And it was funny because I used to have a boat, and I bought it from a guy in Lake Erie. And he was a math teacher turned principal. And he named the boat Aftermath.
Well,
That's connection there. It's like,
Okay.
holy, yeah, we had so much fun. Anyways, we decided that we're going to give Homer Watson some airtime because he's the one that pretty much instigated the show, and then we'll do Carl. And Toni and I are just going to have this casual conversation about what the painting means to us and what he's done that maybe the viewers wouldn't know. Maybe add a little historical perspective to the composition and his subject matter. Now, Toni, you mentioned something earlier when we were chatting off camera about subject matter, and I thought that was quite good what you said.
I said that subject matter is not as important as the atmosphere, the feeling, the light that one conveys with it. It could be anything. It doesn't have to be a painting of something in particular. It has to be how that particular item was painted. And I mentioned one of my favorite contemporary artists, a Spanish painter. His name is Antonio Lopez Garcia. And he's done several paintings of dirty bathroom sinks, of a toilet that's missing a seat. And that sounds kind of disgusting, I know. But you know what? You get the feeling of filth when you look at it. You feel dirty. You want to be able to go to the washroom and wash your hands after seeing one of his paintings. And as an artist, I want to get across my work something more than just wallpaper. I want the viewer to get into it and wash their hands or feel the grass under their feet or sense the smell that an artist gets when he's doing landscapes. Like I look at Barry's work and I could smell the atmosphere. I could smell the foliage and the dew and the sunlight. I could feel the warmth of it. And that's what an artist wants to be able to get across. Using all the senses, not just the visual, but bring in the touch, the sense of smell, you want to be able to hear the birds in the trees, even if you don't see them. And I know as an artist that when I put brush to canvas and I'm painting something that's light and gentle, like a flower or a cloud, I paint as if my brush is on that flower petal. And then I paint a rock and it's heavy. I think heavy, I don't think flower. And when I paint the flower, I don't think rock. And so as an artist, I want to be able to throw myself into that work, into my work, and touch. And I want people to touch the contours and the textures and get that across in paint. And not just to look at, but also to experience. So that's what I wanted to say.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned a really important word, and when I'm teaching young painters, I teach adults now, I teach them how to look at something. And what makes a good painting? And there's all kinds of games that you play, visual games. And I even told this to my students when I was teaching. I said, you know, if you play the game properly and you play with the light, and the light is the very first thing that the viewer is going to look at because it draws you in, not any different than a flower bending to the light. It's a natural thing. We as well as humans gravitate to light. So why not put it in the artwork? And it's the first thing that the viewer is going to see. The whitest part of the painting is where the eye is going to go automatically. So there's little moments on the canvas where we play with the rule of thirds, we play with darks, we play with shadow, and we play with the light. And we put it in a certain spot in the canvas that's comfortable. Now, the other little rule of thumb that I want to mention, because when you come to the show, you're going to want to ask yourself, why do I like this painting? You get 2.5 seconds to make that decision whether the painting works or not. I'm not kidding. You get 2.5 seconds. After that, you're going to walk and look at the next painting, because obviously that painting's not working for you. The game is played. I mean, our brains take in 10,000 bits of information a second. So when you're looking at something, it either hits you with the drama, or it hits you with the subtlety, or it hits you with the composition and the light, and it hits you hard. Okay? And then you're going to walk away and say, wow, that's a great painting, and that was a great experience, and I feel it right here, and I feel it here. It's an emotional experience. When Toni and I were walking past this wall, I looked at this, and I wanted to say something about Homer and what makes him famous. And he, if you notice, the colors are quite muted, as opposed to the work that Toni and I do. Our colors are a little more high key. And you know, the reason for that is because the paint available back 150 years ago just wasn't there. Red was really expensive, blue was really expensive, and a lot of the pigment you could either buy in Toronto, and because he lived in Kitchener, he probably had to go to Toronto to get his paints from the art stores, certainly nothing around Kitchener, Waterloo, or Guelph. And if it wasn't in Toronto, they had to probably ask for it from France or England. And that's where the great painters were. And the lapis lazuli and the reds, which have bits of gold in it, I mean, this stuff was really expensive. So you see a lot of Homer and Carl's work is quite muted and brownish. And this is, to me, a narrative painting, and it's just a huge Cornelius Krieghoff painting as far as I'm concerned. I don't know about you.
And the composition.
Yes, go.
Look at the ladder. Look at this.
Right.
Coming across, bring it back down, bring it back down. It keeps your eye within the work. You're not looking at it and then moving off to the next work. You're actually within the work. It keeps you in.
Right.
Now,
Making a circle.
I have a question for you, mentioning color. Do you know where alizarin crimson comes from? That's a deep wine color, the red pigment.
I think you're going to tell me, because I don't know.
Do you know how expensive it is?
Yes. All the cadmiums are really expensive.
Alizarin crimson, the color, the powder pigment, they originally came from South America, and they were farmed, specially farmed ladybugs, but they have to be grandmothers. And once they're grandmothers, they are powdered, they're pummeled and made into that pigment.
Wow.
That's why it's so expensive.
Oh, wow, that's cool.
And then the earth colors, of course, comes from the earth, so it's less expensive.
Right,
And
the
it's
ochres
browns
and
siennas and so forth.
Right.
So there you go. So that brought back to memory what
Good
the
work.
crimson color is from.
Okay, so focal point, I think we can both agree it's the gentleman
Yes.
at the horse. And if you notice, he's in that rule of thirds that most photographers know about. It's in that quadrant, and that's a comfort zone. Okay, and one of the most difficult, not impossible, but one of the most difficult spots on a painting is in the middle, or way down here, because it throws the balance off. And if you notice, if you squint your eyes, which is another device that we use, you'll notice all the little tops of the sheet roll rhythmically across the canvas on the horse, and this is what he's done to control the light. I think Watson is primarily self-taught, but I think he might have taken some lessons in Europe, because, well, you can teach yourself how to paint. I pretty much am self-taught, but I did go to school, but I did abstract. And again, I mean, abstract, you know, the underlying structure of a realistic painting has abstract concepts, doesn't it? Mm-hmm. I mean, you have to know those rules.
Absolutely.
In order. It doesn't matter, like you say, subject matter is immaterial. But this is a narrative painting. It's very safe. It's probably, you know, Kitchener Dune Village, because that's where he painted. And it has a European look to it. which was very popular at the time, and people with lots of money that had moved from England and France to Canada wanted to be reminded of Europe and their hometown and their country. So a lot of the paintings done back 1880 in that time period looked like Europe, and that was probably not a bad idea if you were trying to, paint for money. I mean, this is your bread and butter. You have to sell paintings to survive. They were selling them to people who were not born in Canada but born in Europe. So it has a European flavor to it.
As a painter, next to my easel, I always have a makeup mirror. It's just a small handheld mirror. And when a work is compositionally complicated, like this one is, I will look at it in reverse. And if it works in reverse, then it works with just looking at it like this. Sometimes when you look at something in reverse, it's off. It's heavy on one side, which means that your eye is conditioned not to see the mistakes when you're working on something so elaborate. So looking at it in reverse gives you a fresh eye, almost like putting the painting away for a few weeks or a month and then looking at it again. You come back at it with a fresh eye. Having a mirror looking in reverse is a little trick that a lot of artists use to see that fresh eye immediately, and then you can correct. So I don't know if he did that, but I would do that with this one as well. And it's interesting that Sandu put this painting on the same wall as my horse and mannequin painting, Lost in Transition, because the composition is very similar. I used spider webs, bringing your eye down, and some beams, and I kept that rule of keeping your eye within the work so it doesn't make the viewer want to leave it and go on to something else. The painting should make you want to stay, and having little subtle things like beams coming down this way, bring your eye back to that main character. That is very important. Also, little thing that I noticed is that as an artist, a lot of people don't really see it offhand, but the real subtle moon, the drip of the water from the bucket, little things that the artist would use just to complete it. It's like that little touch-up at the end that may be invisible to a lot of viewers, but to the artist, it's something, that last little percentage to make it complete. And I know I do that with my work as well.
Little details.
I noticed that his, the brushwork, and then for the hay, he would probably use a palette knife, and just, because I see the lines are very, very straight, and he just quickly added the straw.
Right.
So I love going into museums and galleries and looking at a work, and the most important part for me as a painter is not the finished painting, it's the process. How the artist went from nothing to something. It's that voyage between the two that I'm more interested in than the final work. And so I take it apart, and I try to see the layers underneath, because it's not necessarily the first brush stroke that you see is the last brush stroke. It could be layers on top of that first one that finally gets you to that surface that you're seeing. So I want to take away all those layers and peel it back and see how he proceeded from nothing. So that's what I get from looking at artwork as well.
Right. Maybe one more comment with regards to composition and keeping you in the circle like this you were talking about. And if you notice, if you squint your eyes, you can do that on the other side of the TV there, you've got this very strong angle that he has eliminated, not totally, but some detail that cuts across and then picks up like the ladder. That's there on purpose for that very reason Tony's talking about. And then back up in through here, and then you're following that line around. I've been a big fan of the Dutch landscape painters since the beginning of time. And my wife and I, we went to Amsterdam this spring just to see Cuyp and Ruysdael and these large, I mean, they were doing paintings twice this size from memory, like totally amazing, with huge skies and huge cloud patterns, and they did exactly that. They would make triangles in the sky, they would eliminate the light at the top so your eye would come down to where the light was, and they would eliminate the foreground or the canals or the boat or whatever is in the foreground, and lift your eye, and you would go through the middle of this painting. And they controlled the lighting, and that taught me so much when I was studying art history in school and at Guelph. And you see it here. I mean, it's right here. This is the beginnings of how you learn how to paint. And as Toni was saying, it's not always about the detail, but for me, it's an emotional experience. That's what I bring to the painting. And I'm a big fan of Cornelius Krieghoff, the narrative from Quebec, the Group of Seven. It's just, you know, and it's all here, all of those elements. And that's why I think I wanted to pick this painting to chat about. So Toni, you can pick out Carl Ahrens' piece, because we both agree this is an unsung hero in Canada, and he's very good. He's as good as Homer Watson, in some cases better, in my opinion, and not too many people know about him. So we're proud to be in the same company as him. So if you want to pick out a Carl Ahrens, and then we can chat about it.
Okay.
Okay, good.
Sounds good.
Thank you.
Today, drawing is lost. No one draws as much anymore. With the digital camera, we go from taking a photograph to a painting. The process, which I talked about earlier, involves creating something from nothing. And there are steps along the way to get to the final stage, like they did many, many years ago. And in that sense, you become one with the process, with the works that you do. A lot of artists nowadays, they take a photograph and it's a painting. And I've done that too. So I'm not saying it's a bad thing. I'm just saying that's the process. That's how things are done nowadays. So the drawing aspect is mostly lost to a lot of artists anymore. A lot of artists can't draw.
Now you're talking about classical drawing
Classical
too,
drawing,
right?
yes, and the steps that involve, from sketching to more elaborate, to the process as far as getting your ideas on paper and then worked out, manipulated, changed until you get the composition you want and the light you want and gray tones.
I so agree with you. I've been to Guelph and looked at some student work, and I'm sorry, I hate to beat up other schools, but the drawing's not there.
No.
It's not like people, like you say, they've lost the ability, or they're not interested in developing drawing skills for structure.
True.
And so anyways, I didn't want to interrupt, but this is one of yours here, and you've got to tell the audience what it took to come up with this, because it's an incredible story.
Well, this is a study, a drawing for a painting that is not here in the show, Oil on Canvas. But a little town north of where I used to live in Harriston, Clifford, actually where Whiteman is from, I travel along this little road, Highway 9 going up north, and I would see this antique store many times. And I decided I needed to do a work, but I picked a terrible time to stand in front of it to take a photograph as a reference for my studio, because it was the day after Christmas. It was minus 1,000. It was, the snow reached easily a foot above the glass here. So this is all covered in snow. But I used the idea, the building signage and so forth, and I used that as my bones, and I made everything else up. It's all fabricated. The mannequin is still in there, the one that was with the horse. But everything else is completely made up, and of course the Grant Wood is in there too. So this is part of my Lost in Transition series. Now this reflects, old age and retirement homes and being forgotten as an older person, like people are in nursing
Well, I see two objects that have been cast away.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. It's been
for resale.
They don't resale if people want them, and a lot of people don't want them. But so the drawing process helped me create the tonals that I needed, light and dark, fairly quickly. So I work in black and white, and then from there, if you have had the bit of art history that I was taught, there are grayscales and there are color scales, and then each grayscale has a tonal value that belongs with a color. And I could do that out of my head approximately, where there's white and there's black and there are all the gray tones in the middle, and you pick a red and there's a white and a red, and then all the tones that you add more red to the white and you get to the final red. And if you take a photograph of that red scale, it should match fairly similar to the black and white scale as far as tonal values. So I do that subconsciously, where my paintings always had drawings to them. Again, I'm telling you that with digital camera it makes it too easy to ignore it, but I know I can tell you that I can do it. So knowing that you can do it gives you that license to not do it. And so I skip stages because I know I could do those stages, and which gives me that license to do it. Going to Carl Ahrens, and he does have paintings in the show. I just wanted to pick this little grouping of 3 drawings. He has worked out his composition of what he wants to do on little scraps, and a little bigger one, and that's out of ink. These 2 are drawings of pencil, and he's worked out all the tonal values. As things progressively get further back, because you're working on a flat surface, you want to fool the brain, the eye, the brain, to know that as things get further back, you're looking at 3-dimensionally. So on a flat piece of paper, you can't get further back than that. So we try to trick the brain into knowing that the stronger contrasts are in the foreground, the less contrast goes further back. And that gives you a sense of 3 dimensions on a flat surface. And he's done it down here as well, where the contrasts of the larger trees in the front are stronger and then lighter in the background. So it gives you a sense of depth.
Right. So what you're actually referring to, Tony, is the aerial perspective.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
Like there's single point, 2-point perspective in architecture, but there's aerial perspective here where you're mentioning the back is softer, the foreground is heavier, so you get the sense of distance and 3D effect on a flat surface. Right?
So it's not just size, it's also tonal ranges that you work with to get things to look like they're 3 dimensions.
Right.
Doing it in drawing, it's much more immediate for me, because I'm very detail-oriented. So painting takes a long time. Barry has mentioned one of his larger paintings of the tower. What was it called? Your child built that tower.
Oh,
in a tree.
the treehouse.
Treehouse.
Skull Castle.
Skull Castle. That you take 3 to 4 weeks to do that large painting. Well, that would get me as far as the underpainting possibly, and then there's overlays on top of that. A painting that size, like for example, of the Lost in Transition, the horse and the mannequin, that probably took me about 4 months, maybe 5 months, to get it all composed, to get it on the canvas, worked out all the lights and the details and so forth. It's a thinking process, it's about the process. So I'm really in the process of, I want to stay there. I don't want to finish it. I don't want to just finish it and move on to something else. I love being in that moment of creating. Drawing gives you that sense of beginning, and then the stages that you get to the final end. So like I said, I didn't know anything about Carl Ahrens, and these are quick sketches he has here in the show. He has more elaborate oils. But I wanted to pick out 3 drawings that gives you a sense of where to start. And I just love the work on paper. The other thing that you don't see a lot of works on paper anymore in galleries is that because it's not valued as much. They're looked on as preparatory sketches for final works. And I was told a long time ago, I don't know if you were told this, that works on paper are not usually collected by public galleries and so forth because it's paper. you want to be able to create works on canvas and wood and panels. That gives a sense of permanency, that it's there for a long time. Though, if it's watercolor on paper, if it's drawing on paper, if the paper is acid-free, good quality paper, and it's kept out of sunlight, it'll last as long, if not longer, than anything on canvas that has a varnish over top.
Mm-hmm. Now they have watercolors that are done by the Greeks and the Egyptians.
Absolutely.
That are like 4,000 years old. So I was told that. But working on the paper that I work on, it was like cardboard. It was actually ripped up cotton fibers, and they made handmade paper out of cotton fiber.
But it's still paper.
Yeah, it's still paper, and it does take a back seat, and it has.
That's unfortunate.
Yeah, it is, because for me, it's my favorite medium. I just wanted to add, Toni, that drawing is the basis of everything, and I always encourage people that I'm teaching that you've got to learn how to draw. It's as simple as that. A pencil is substituted by a paintbrush, and you're going to be drawing with a paintbrush anyway. So you need to know what the values are and what proportion is. And in here you see this is maybe not the best drawing, but back in the day, I remember studying the Romantics and the Pre-Raphaelites. These guys didn't have cameras. They had to memorize subject matter. And they were doing really detailed work. So to have that drawing skill is an absolute necessity. And the other bit, not having a camera in hand, you have to be outside and you have to draw in plein air. And that's really hard to do. I mean, you're dealing with the sunlight, which really, I get headaches in the sun now. But
and it changes, constantly changes.
Oh man, what a nightmare, eh? I mean, everyone's experienced watching shadows move because you can't draw in an hour. It's a 3-4 hour experience. Or you may have to go back to the same spot and the light's different.
Absolutely.
You know, like it's crazy, but this is the stuff we put up with, but it's a necessity and it comes with the territory. I mean, this is foundation skills that you need in order to paint. I haven't done a drawing in a long time, but I've done my fair share of etchings, and the lights just went out.
Oh, that's okay. Just get them to turn back on. You can pick right up where you left off, and I can cover it up. There you go.
There we go.
We've been talking too long.
Well, this could be. I mean,
We have to talk more like Italian.
I'm talking
Yes.
about drawing and how quick sometimes these images are done. I mean, I love this. And you know, whether you're 14 or 44, you can do this. And it really is, again, the foundation for watercolor or painting. I find, like Toni, I'm doing a bit of detail, but I'm getting away from that now. I'm doing a little more abstract, and I like swishing the brush. My brushes are bigger, but there's still that underlying structure of, you know, detail. Just looking at a painting there's so much drawing in that landscape over there, it just drives me crazy. And time is irrelevant. I mean, Toni talks about 3 to 4 months in doing a piece of art. And yes, I mean, if that's what it takes, that's what it takes. You're in that studio until you get to sign it, and you try not to get too beat up over the timeline. Time is irrelevant.
It is, completely.
I mean, my best painting done years ago was 2.5 hours.
Yeah.
I had so much fun with that painting. I've framed it and kept it, and it's in my bedroom, and it's, to me, a wonderful little piece. It spoke to me. The subject matter is charming. It's you know, Nova Scotian folk art. 2.5 hours, and it was done, and I just, wow, it was a wow. 2.5 seconds, 2.5 hours. What's with the 2.5? I don't know. Anyways, should we look at one Carl Ahrens painting? Because he was a master of color as well as, you know, drawing and stuff. Both these guys could draw. And you can see even with Toni's work how important drawing is. And he has the skills, and that's what you need. If you want to do what we do, put in your 10,000 hours of hard work, and you can be an artist too.
It's like having a child, but the child winds up in your household at 20 years old, and you've missed the birth, you missed the teens, you missed the adolescence.
Yeah.
It doesn't feel the same way having a 20-year-old in your house unless you had it coming in from the hospital at birth.
Yeah.
And raising that child, the process of raising that child at 20 years old It's not about the 20-year-old, the final work.
Yeah.
It's about the process of
Absolutely.
getting
Yeah,
there.
yeah.
It means so much more.
Yeah, yeah. You got to have the hard work done, right? You got to understand foundation.
Absolutely.
And that's raising a child.
And understanding it and doing it are two different things. You don't have to do it if you understand it. It's your choice. But if you do it because you don't understand it, you're missing.
You are.
You're missing.
There's an
You're missing
element
so
in the artwork that's going to be missing, and
Absolutely.
people aren't going to get it. Right?
I figure, Barry, that the 40 years I've been painting professionally, that I would say 10, 12, maybe even 15 years of it has spent stretching canvas, putting gesso on, sharpening pencils, doing underlying drawings, preparing my canvases for my painting. And nowadays you don't really have to do as much anymore because you can transfer things much more quickly. Spending all that time getting to that point where you can start painting, I know the process of getting there with the grids and the enlarging of small drawings into larger things with grids and so forth, or tracing paper, tracing your drawing and then tracing it onto canvas, and you don't have to do that as much anymore. But I understand how to do it, and when I create something that misses those steps, I'm still aware of those steps.
Well, you're good enough now that you can take those shortcuts because you've already done that early
Absolutely.
preparatory work. And to teach somebody how to draw, it's not copying is still a great skill, and it's still a great preparatory endeavor to get where you want to be with painting. Classical drawing, we mentioned that word earlier, where older teachers would teach their students how to draw, Roman Greek casts and get the lighting.
Repeatedly, over and over and over, different angles.
That's your homework.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and you got to do that to get where you want to be.
I had someone come to me many years ago who wanted to take art lessons from me, but wanted to expand her painting. And she brought her samples with her like I asked. And I said, you know what, in order to expand your painting, let's start from drawing, because your drawing is missing. You need to be able to establish that.
Yeah.
She didn't come back after the first lesson because I didn't teach her how to paint. I taught her the basics of drawing and perspective and horizon lines and all those things that her painting was missing. In order for her to fulfill her needs and wants with her painting, she had to back up because she missed a whole slew of preliminaries before you get to that stage. And she wanted something immediate. And I'm sorry, it doesn't come that immediate.
It doesn't work that way.
So, there we go.
So we thought it wouldn't be fair just to do Carl in pencil and black and white. I'm so pleased that it's sitting beside Skull Castle. I love this watercolor. For me, it's my favorite Carl Ahrens. This took quite an effort to bring in. It came from California.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, they brought that in, and the fellow that actually owns this painting, his last name is Ahrens. And is it Jonathan? No, Michael. Michael Ahrens.
Michael, yes.
And there's no connection. There's no family. He saw the guy's name and said, Artist Ahrens. Oh, let me look him up. And he liked him immediately and started buying his artwork. So he actually has 22 paintings in his own collection that he owns. Anyways, this is so gentle. It's romantic. I don't know. It doesn't really have a focal point, but I think he gets away with it. Technically, he's working wet into wet and then dry on dry, and he's got these little bits here that he's left puddles, and he knows exactly what he's doing because these little puddles help to anchor the painting. Purple hills in the background, which says distance. We talked about that. And this yellow sky, yellow and purple are complementary colors. That's why we like this painting. The brain it's one of those things the brain likes to see is complementary colors. So red and green and blue and orange and yellow and purple. And for some reason, the group of 7 discovered it. I used to know the guy's name that did the science on that. He used to teach it. Anyways, the French Impressionists knew it, they played with it, and it was, oh my God, technology and science discovery. anyways, that's my little bit, and it's so simple, and that's the beauty of it, simplicity. Okay, you can hop in there, Tony.
Absolutely. Again, the complementary colors. I noticed in Barry's work very evidently that he uses cool and warms constantly, one next to one another. There's a story that a woman who was with the gallery that we are with now, formerly Nancy Poole Studio, did a whole series of paintings that were based in France. And she used to sell, she sold everything she did, but they were interiors. And her colors are vivid, beautiful reds and greens and yellows and purples.
Is that Mary Pavey?
No.
Oh.
I won't give her a name.
Oh.
In case she sees this. But that's not a bad story. But she came back from France doing landscapes, plein air, out in the open, and her paintings were missing that punch. That she did greens, but there weren't any reds. She did blues, but there weren't any, oranges, and nothing was selling. And I went to their opening, and she looked really despondent because usually her work sells just like that. And so she asked me, because I was still in my 20s at that point, and she was much older than I was, and I kind of felt intimidated by her. But she asked my opinion. I said, and at that point I did watercolors too. I said, perhaps it's because you're missing the color. If a tree is brown, has browns and so forth, the shadows should have some cools in it. If this part of this field has cools and greens and blues in it, perhaps it needs some reds, oranges, and yellows in it, and give it that vibration that you had in your interiors. She took them all off the wall after the day of the opening, took them all home, and after the weekend brought them back, and she had added different complementary colors. She sold out.
Oh my God, what a great story.
Thank you to me. I give myself credit for that, but I'm over-exaggerating a little bit. But it's true. Complementary colors make the work vibrant. It keeps it away from them being monochromatic and dull. And adding that sense of vibration makes the work move. It's alive, and it just feels good.
I think that vibrant is a good word. Mm-hmm. Yeah, those two colors together, they start to pulsate.
And they could be very subtle, but it still vibrates.
Yeah, I agree. Anyways, Tony, thank you, buddy. It's a real pleasure. We're just really getting to know each other from this show, even though we're showing at the same gallery in Toronto, and we'll give a Loch Gallery punch.
Sure,
down on 16 Hazelton Lanes. Anyways, we both show there. You can Google us. We have our own websites and stuff. But it's been an absolute pleasure, Tony, to share the space with you. I'm so grateful. And if you want to really get a beat on this gentleman, Google TED Talks Toni Luciani, and you will be totally blown away by this man. He shared a couple years with his mom, and it's every young boy, older. I mean, my mom passed away with the same ailments, and our lives are parallel. It's kind of weird, but anyways, thank you for doing this and getting to know you a little bit better.
Absolutely, I've admired your work for many years since we started. I remember we had a show together in separate rooms at the Kitchener-Waterloo Art Gallery.
I remember that, yeah.
And you had the major space. I had a little corner. And I remember going around and seeing your massive watercolors, and I thought, my gosh, this is fantastic. So
thank you.
I really appreciate our friendship.
Yeah, great. Amen. Thank you. My pleasure. And please come to the Wellington County Museum, see the show. It's going to hang till January the 6th. It's their Christmas show, and I know the museum would love to see you here, and we hope you enjoy what you see.
And there's more to the museum than just the show. There are different displays on 2 floors, 3 floors, 2 floors. Some of them are permanent. This building used to be the poorhouse in the middle 1800s, and it's alive with activity, even though in spirit. Thank you.
Anyways, thank you very much.
The preceding program was brought to you by Whiteman TV and Bruce Telecom.